Working Cows Podcast, episode 231.
Welcome to the podcast that gives producers a platform to discuss and share paradigm-challenging practices. Practices that have increased the effectiveness of their operation and the joy that their families have received from this lifestyle.
Howdy, everybody. This is Clay Connery, host of the Working Cows Podcast, powered by the Global Ag Network. Very excited to start a two-part series today, and I'll lay out the picture for this series in just a moment. But basically, we're going to look at stockmanship, a day of stockmanship in the vein of Bud Williams, from start to finish, from sunrise to whenever the cattle are trailed back out to where they're going that day, and talk about how in the wisdom of Bud Williams, according to Dr. Tom Noffsinger and Steve Cote, how we should approach that day. So today we're starting with Dr. Tom Noffsinger. We're going to talk to him about how do we approach the herd and how do we get them started and moving towards the corrals in a way that maintains that maternal function and some of the benefits of that bottom line to the bottom line in that regard. So very excited to be joined today by Dr. Tom Noffsinger. He is a very valuable asset to the beef industry in a lot of the wisdom that he has shared with us over the years, some of which he learned directly from Bud Williams. So, Dr. Tom, thanks for joining me today on the Working Cows Podcast.
It's an honor to be with you, Clay. I really enjoy this invitation.
Well, you know, you were in Sturgis here. I don't know if it was a year and a half ago now, I suppose, doing some stockmanship stuff, and I missed the first half of that workshop that you put on, and had regretted that I'd missed that. It sounded like a pretty good presentation about. I guess how I would put it is keeping the maternal instincts intact as far as when we approach cattle to move them. So let me start us off by painting a picture. We've got a group that have showed up at the house, just before dawn on a morning in the fall when we're getting ready to maybe precondition some calves that day, and we're all saddled up and riding out. And we come to the place where those mamas and babies have bedded down in their, in the pasture. What are we doing? How are we approaching them to make sure that this is as low stress of an interaction as it possibly can be, and that we get to the gate with those pairs still together?
So, Clay, probably I would back up and as we drank our coffee before we saddled the horses, it would be fun to create some discussion and share experiences and raise our expectations. It is. I was in practice in cow-calf practice for 35 years, and I was always curious why certain ranches had me visit often, and why other ranches were problem-free health-wise and really didn't need me except to do reproductive work and management or consultation work. And as I look back on those experiences, the cattle genetics were similar. The feed resources were almost identical. The climate was perfectly identical. So the big differences in those scenarios was intervention opportunities. And so as I got to, I was honored to spend time with Bud Williams in the early 2000s. Had really special visitors from Queensland, Australia, Chris and Miranda Donahoe, and those two sources changed my way of looking at a herd of mothers and babies, and illustrating to me that I had to elevate my expectations for maternal behavior.
You talk, and I really appreciate that, starting out with the morning coffee and raising some expectations as far as the cowboys that are there that day. I think that is we oftentimes, whether that's because cowboys are notoriously late, and I've got my hand in the air, or what, and we have a set start time, and we've got to get out there, and get going. And so those conversations where we set and raise those expectations don't often happen, or maybe I don't know if I've ever been a part of one where it did. So could you tell me about how that conversation might go?
Might as we're riding down toward that herd, we might discuss things about nursing frequency and the maternal bond, and ask whoever's riding beside us, what percentage of those cows do you expect to have spent the entire night with their baby, even as those cattle are reaching weaning age? One of the differences I noticed is I saw differences in health within cow-calf operations was simply, if I went to a ranch early in the morning to look at a problem issue, is as we topped the hill, what were our observations? Ranches that had numerous calves that bedded down near a windmill or near shelter and were in clusters of 20 to 30 to 50 babies with no mothers, that should be a signal. That should be a danger sign. And so as we're riding down there, we might strike up some discussion about what we expect to see and what we want to expect to maintain, and what the importance of that is. And so hopefully it'll set our observation of not how fast we can get these to the pen to vaccinate them, but how we manage the gait, how we manage the flow, how we manage the herd, and most importantly, what happens when we see the very tiniest response to our presence.
Mm. And so you're saying that generally, as a general rule, if those calves have spent the night with their mothers and they wake up in the morning, or you approach them in the morning and you find them with their mothers, there's a less of a chance of health issues in that herd. Is that what you're saying? Absolutely. We've got a head start. We've absolutely got a head start. And so as we, if they're doing that when they, near weaning time, if they're doing that when calves weigh 400 to 600 pounds, it's a slam dunk that they've done that since birth. Maybe that this whole process started at conception, and that's what the foundation of fetal programming. That's the foundation of creating an immune system that is functional for the rest of that baby's life. Is that a genetic thing within that cow herself, or is that a trained thing within the stockmanship and the handling of that cow? Is it, the way we would maybe say that, is it nature or nurture? It's absolutely. We know there's some subtle genetic differences within breeds and between breeds, but the major differences are what happened to that animal from birth to conception and that sort of thing. We're getting more and more evidence that anything that confuses and reduces confidence in animals changes the hypothalamus at the brain and the hypothalamus's influence on the adrenal glands, and that's what we want to prevent doing, and we want to try to continue to find behaviors, simple behaviors that indicate to us that hypothalamus is on tune to tell the adrenal gland to secrete hormones like oxytocin, vasopressin, serotonin, dopamine, not cortisol. And it is when Bud would work with confused animals or animals that had no confidence and were very, very sensitive and confused, he could see that he could create change in those animals, and their behavior became very, very positive and very relaxed. And he would point out that change, and I think understanding the influence that has on production, safety, and performance and disease resistance is just amazing. Yeah. No, that's, one of the first notes I wrote down here as you started talking was the bottom line of stockmanship, and I mean, by that, I mean, how does good stockmanship affect the bottom line? as those animals are not encountering situations and stockmanship approaches that confuse them or put them in a position where they will be confused, they're going to secrete less cortisol and more of the good adrenal secretions, and that's going to result in just continued compounding effects, I'm guessing.
So, and I think my journey is just starting on understanding the first response to a herd of animals in my presence, and a lot of you stockmen up in the northwestern part of America have a huge head start on a lot of the other people. It amazes me what some of you do that you take for granted, and it all has to do with powers of observation and responding to the tiniest change. That I want to continue to understand that. I'm in almost all feedlot medicine today, and as we get our caregivers at feedlots to be better stockmen, what amazes me when I ride into a pen of cattle at some feedlots, there will be rows of cattle standing broadside to me, turning their head and requesting guidance. At the next feed yard, I might ride in that pen and there'll only be 1 or 2 animals out of 200 requesting guidance. The rest of them are ignoring my presence or leaving. And so there's some things that you have done out in pastures that you have created in these animals during intervention opportunities that I would want to secure as I went out to bring those mothers and babies to the corral for processing.
Sure.
And so those are things that I would want to secure and not take for granted.
So thank you for bringing that back around, because that's where I was headed next. Is you said that it's stockmanship. I mean, there's a little bit of genetics here, but it's mostly nurture, right? It's not
absolutely
the nature is there if we will stop getting in the way of it. I think is what you're saying.
I think Clay, I've read a tiny little book the other day that's very, very powerful. It's the title of this book is the Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard, and he states in that text that creation was pretty much complete in the first few verses of Genesis. Creativity is the embellishment and understanding that what's always been in front of us forever, and that's what stockmanship is to me. Is having the confidence and the patience to study and appreciate all of the things that have been in front of people like me all our lives that we've not recognized. It's purely beautiful.
This is part of a 2-part series. The second part is with Steve Cote. I've already recorded that episode just in the interest of full disclosure. And that we got into a conversation about Bud Williams and what set him apart. And that's what he said set Bud apart was his ability to observe, his ability to see that, like you said, that smallest response and take that information in and then interact with that cow the right way going forward, based on what her body language was telling him.
Oh, absolutely. And Bud learned about the term proper position his entire life. He was still learning, and I miss him so much. But that word position is very far reaching and is part of posture, part of distance, part of where we start the job that morning. Back to our ride down to pick up this herd. If let's say the working facilities were on the north side of the ranch or north side of the pasture, and we start at those facilities to go find this herd, my intuition, my tendency is still to go around behind that herd and start pushing them toward the pens. And it's just something I've got to get out of my head. That working from the front, saying hello, creating some counterclockwise movement in that herd, no matter which direction ultimately you want to go, And that is the finish day of every time during the summer that you were there to check those cattle, provide a mineral or do a health check or ride through them. You could prepare these animals for this day to the point where they truly understand where you need them to go.
Right. And then you're removing that confusion, right? I mean, that's
absolutely.
That's cool. Okay. So that's kind of where I've been trying to get is say that we come up on them and we know it's nurture, so we need to change our behavior. If we come up on them and they're not with their babies, what are we going to do if they're not with their babies? How are we going to approach that? And how long is that process to get that maternal instinct rebooted, if that's the right way to say it?
You would stop if you see lone calves. The younger animals are easier to move and more sensitive and learn more quickly than their older mother. And so I would just say hello to a lone calf and ask him to go find his mother. Just send him someplace. Or if there's a cow there and her baby's 20 yards away instead of 20 feet away, if you said hello to that cow, you'd send her to find her baby. Hopefully just some subtle 2 or 3 examples of that would key the other animals to start pairing up and probably that time of the day you'd start seeing nursing behavior occur. Once those babies start nursing, it is absolutely important not to ask for any herd movement till they've had their breakfast, they're done nursing, and they volunteer to leave. And that's still very hard for me to do. If it's a challenge, why get out your phone and text somebody or check your messages, do something and not interrupt that nursing. So I think just saying hello and showing these cattle what you expect. If you have a lone calf and you have a tag number there, or you know that mother, she's a special needs person, or a special needs cow. And so you need to put her down and next spring when she calves, you wouldn't tag that calf for 2 weeks. Instead, you would take the baby to the mother, take the mother to the baby, and it takes just a couple seconds, and you can increase the nursing frequency in that pair from 2 or 3 times a day to 20 times a day. And health and performance is a return on that.
Wow. Yeah. And so this isn't a culling criteria. It's a change of management criteria. Absolutely.
We've all, with the things that Bud have taught us, we've always had the idea that we'll cull the wild cows. Gosh darn, they're the best selective grazer we have. Most of the time, they're very protective, keep the predators away from their baby, and they have a big old calf in the fall. So we're selling the wrong cow.
Right.
We can fix her. We can fix her.
Yeah. No, you're that rings true with my experience that you cuss her all year, especially at calving season, but then somehow that amnesia kicks in the fall when she brings that monster calf in every year, and you're like, well, I guess we could run her one more year.
No, and she's the best animal to learn from.
Right. Oh yeah. She's trying to.
She's the teacher. You change her, and it is Bud never did say flight zone, but he would really focus on her working zone. And he would be in really, really beautiful contact with that animal from a long distance, and he could watch that working zone get less and less and less. Pretty soon she's just in the herd and you forgot which one she was. It's really fascinating.
Yeah, I suppose flight zone indicates prey, right? That you are the prey if you are triggering a flight zone. So if you adopt a non-predator posture towards those animals, they will start reacting in a working zone, not in a flight zone.
Yeah, people. My feedlot cowboys still struggle with that, and they're even in a feedlot pen. There's a fear that the cattle will get away from them. Cattle don't want to get away from anybody. They want to come to you. They want to see you. Their most precious instinct is to be able to see us, come to us.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, so we've set the expectations. We've ridden to them. We've said hello. We've waited for nursing behavior to start. You mentioned counterclockwise movement. Would that be the next step, or what's next?
Sure. I would be at the front. I would be at the front of the herd. I'd be between the herd and the gate or the destination, and I would go. I would try to set it up so that I could encourage the first 2 or 3 animals from the left eye, so that I would actually ride by them just a little ways, pull her head around, and then immediately go to the front, bring my horse's head by that eye, and the minute they step forward, I would say thank you and give them more space. And so getting, I think one of the rules that really has helped me to understand that is whether you're in a processing alley or loading trucks or moving a herd of cows, always think about take 2 to get 12, take 2 to get 10, take 2 to get 100. And if we can get some orderly, focused, purposeful movement in 2, 3, 4, 5 cattle, the other animals can't resist following. We'd use the motion in the front to attract all of the followers, and whatever help we had, their job was to not interfere with that, and most importantly, not get behind the herd. It's really, really important to stay out to the side and do almost nothing unless an animal requests you for more guidance, more presence, more confidence.
So would you say then that it's the case that if we have things working right, that we generally have too much help at our
absolutely
in our gathers?
Yeah. It's so hard. Cattle crave to take guidance from one person. Chris and Miranda and Ogathella in Queensland, they taught their replacement heifers to follow them horseback from the time they were weaned. Those replacement heifers, if you went to the front of that herd and moved your horse's hip a little bit, backed into them, stepped forward, backed into them, they just hook onto you, and you just led those cattle everywhere. It's the first time I've ever seen cattle being led with understanding rather than feed. And that's a really, really beautiful sight.
Right. I was sitting in church one time, and we had a guest speaker there talking, and he was telling about his experience with in Israel, watching a sheep herder work with his, or maybe a goat herder, whatever it was, work with his goats. And he kind of asked the question, why isn't that guy working his goats or his sheep from behind? And the answer from the tour guide was, well, here they lead them everywhere. And he was, kind of just making the distinction between how we do things in Western South Dakota and how they do things there. And I'm like, well, I think they probably got it right. Maybe we should be approaching it more like they are.
That's our ultimate goal. And what's fun about that is that you create that behavior mostly by managing the gait.
As in GAIT?
Yeah, no, GATE.
Okay, all right.
So and it may be a gate that you had in a holding pen when you let the cattle out to graze. It might be a gate in a cross fence as you go to the corral. It might be the gate of destination. But most importantly, when we've had cattle confined and enclosed in a working facility and we're ready to send them back home, it's really important that somebody be at that gate to create orderly flow. That's when you teach cows to not leave that pen without their baby. That's when you teach those cows to not go in a pasture rotation unless they have their family with them. And I can't emphasize how much patience that takes if things are awry. But once you accomplish that, then it takes no time to keep that behavior in place. And I thought about that a lot. My father, when he'd send my brother and I out to do a chore with cattle, the last thing he would always tell us is to make sure and get a really nice count on those cattle. And so we'd go in, we'd put our fly control on or whatever we did. It was really important that they left that pen slowly and orderly and single file so we could get a good count on them. We'd get back to the house and we'd say, Dad, there were 68 heifers over there in that west pasture. How many were there supposed to be? He said, I have no idea. Don't matter. But you got a good count on them. And so these kinds of things help you remember how important gate management is. Bud helped me at the Maddox Ranch here in Nebraska. It was just Jack and John gave us the opportunity to study and learn and change and observe. And that's probably the most important thing we learned was that a lot of times if we're gathering a herd and somebody's down there sitting at the gate, it bothers the people trying to push the cattle through the gate. Oh no, they should run to that person and be willing to use him as a guidepost and know that that's the destination. Very, very exciting.
Sure. So yeah, you were, as we were working through our scenario there, you said that you've said hello. You've rode past their left eye, which I'd like to clarify that. Maybe the way that I always talk about it, just to keep it straight in my head, is it left eye would be driver's side, right eye would be passenger side. It doesn't change, right? I mean, it's the left eye is the one, on the driver's side of the cow as you're approaching them. Is that right?
Yeah, Clay, I think, well, it all depends on the herd. There should be no difference. Okay. That if we've done our training, there should be very, very little difference. But on cattle that you've met for the first time, or it's been a while since you've been out there, what's important to remember is that the optic nerves cross. And whatever image goes into the left eye of the prey animal goes over to the right or more cognitive side of the brain. Whatever goes into the right eye goes over to the more reactive or threatening side of the brain, the left brain. And so this, knowing that the cattle crave to see you, and the second most important behavior they love to do is they love to come half around you. And so it's easy to start on that left eye, get them, and then you can go to the front and go over that left eye, just like training a colt. That's why we jump on both sides numerous times to get that animal to trust us on both sides. But that the counterclockwise movement and going to the left eye is a time saver. And especially if you've got pretty sensitive animals, it will indicate to you your ability to observe the difference. That's the important thing. So if you've got some cows that somebody's taken the motion out of, you'll be really disappointed on the left eye. You'll need to get over on the right side and wake them up. No difference between a set of half Brahma cows and a Holstein. Those Zebu cattle, they're precious to work with, but we better start on the left side. A Holstein, you might want to trot around there and wake him up. So it's a time saver more than anything.
Interesting. You said at one point, unless if they request more guidance, how would you pick that up?
You just keep repeating the message.
But what's their body language that's indicating they're requesting more guidance?
They will be willing to stand there and pull that heavy old head around and ask you. So if you go down and the first 7 cows in the front of that herd are straight on to you, and you're walking, you would never walk straight between their eyes. That's when you use the angles that Bud talked about. You just come across gently until they change. And usually if you went to the left the first time and then came back to that right, there'd be 2 or 3 animals step forward and bring that head and neck around to the left and say, "What do you want?" And the minute you see that, you've got to get out in front of that head as soon as you can so that they can see you without that discomfort. Be available to them. Then when that head's straight, they're comfortable, they're balanced, they understand, you understand. Then all you have to do is take your horse's head by that eye, and when she steps forward, give her more room. If she walks out there 3 steps and does it again, you repeat that. She stops, looks back at you, go out there, be more available, get her comfortable, get her balanced, get her straight. Tell her the second time. The time you do that 2 or 3 times with that lead cow, she's headed to the pen and she won't stop.
Yep.
That's a lot what Bud, I've watched and watched. That's a lot what Bud did to get motion started that was perpetual. And that's a blessing, very much a blessing.
Yeah, very good. I appreciate that. So we've given them guidance. We're headed to the gate, I would assume by this point. And you mentioned the importance of having somebody at the gate. What is that guy doing? What side of the gate is he on? Give me some of those things.
Okay. So what you would do before that, Clay, is if you're going a quarter mile or a half mile to the gate, and you notice that any of those calves are hanging back, or you have cows that are stepping ahead of their babies, that person in front has to slow that lead cow down until those calves are comfortable and are beside their mother. And if we have a row of 10 or 15 babies behind, we almost need to stop the herd, and then somebody back there gently ask those babies to get up there where they're supposed to be. And so maintaining that motion, the biggest problem we have to understand is there's a lot of difference in the speed that cattle walk comfortably compared to a really nice range horse. And so if we've got really nice horses, they want to be comfortable at 4, 4.5, 5 miles an hour. A cow is more comfortable at 3. So that's why we have to ride back and forth or keep messing with our horse so that he's comfortable and moving. And the main thing to do there is that gives the horse the chance to balance his foot cadence with the desired cow foot cadence. That cadence, that headset on that horse is the key to that maintaining a steady flow that calf can keep up with. So before we get to the gate, that would be our focus, is keeping cattle moving comfortably at the cadence and the foot speed that they want to. If we've got a gate ahead of us and we expect the cattle to go through the gate and turn slightly to the right, then that person near the gate, he's not going to set at the gate post. He's going to be 2 or 3 posts down, but he's definitely going to be on the right side of the gate opening. That pulls the cows through the gate and twists them to the right. If we want the herd, the destination to tend to fade to the left, be the opposite. He'd set 3 or 4 posts down. That draws the cows to that side of the gate. And the minute they go through there, their minds will turn to the left. And if the flow is orderly and so forth, then it's important that the person at the gate doesn't set on his horse perpendicular to the flow. That stops cattle. So he could either be looking through the gate or back at the remainder of the herd. That angle of that pony really helps cattle see that. It would be really better if he not only had some angle, but he had a young colt. Say he might be backing up a step or two, stepping forward a step or two, asking the colt to move his front over, moving his hip over. That kind of subtle motion enhances the depth perception of the cattle. Their vision is so important. So rather than trying to stare down there at a statue of a horse, wondering how far away he is, just moving that horse's hip over, moving that front leg over, asking him to step back or two. All of a sudden the cow say, that's where he is. That's how far he is. I know what that is. Let's go find him.
Sure. And he's on the same side of the gate or of the fence as the cattle. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Clay,
now,
absolutely.
You described normal cow working in my experience so far as ending up having a few calves at the back or some calves at the back. Are we compounding those issues with the maternal instincts by allowing that to continue to happen? Should we always be stopping that herd, getting those calves back with their mothers before we keep moving on?
Absolutely, Clay. It'd be if there's 3 or 4, you can probably interact with that baby and tip him up in the herd. But if there's 20, you need to stop. It would be worth stopping the herd and asking them to go back, right. And then coming. They went as far that way. That is, and the timing is the key to success, right? So the sooner we do that, the less time it'll take.
Sure. And I mean, like I said, we get in too big of a hurry generally when it comes to working cows, and my wife is the best about reminding me, we have all day to do this. And so I think that maybe is what stops us from taking the time to do that. But just to make the argument for it, you're telling me that the reduced illness, reduced sickness in the herd, and the performance of that the calf is going to be worth it 10 times out of 10. Absolutely,
Clay. What drove that home to me was feedlot cattle behavior. I don't know if this might be hard for you to understand, but in most American feedlots, we put more cattle in a pen than can get to the bunk at one time. So we give these cattle 7 to 9 inches of bunk space, and most of our cattle are wider than 7 inches. And so, but what intrigues me on herds where we've done these kinds of things and increased nursing frequency and taught all animals to be really willing to take many small carbohydrate meals a day, that's exactly what happens in the feedlot. And so these animals, instead of eating twice a day, they're willing to go up, graze at that bunk a few minutes, step back, let their brother in there, that happens all day long. And so it is learned behavior from day one of nursing frequency.
Right.
And you think of we have a lot of digestive risk in feed yards because we feed these animals very, very well. And if we have cattle eating once a day or once every other day or just twice a day, that carbohydrate load is really risky when it comes to the digestive biome, especially in the small bowel and the floating colon.
That's fascinating. You said that we're encouraging them to take multiple small carbohydrate meals a day. Well, I mean, it becomes pretty obvious when you just think about the performance of a bum calf or the performance of that twin you pulled off and have been gorging him twice a day with a bottle, compared to the performance of his brother or sister. That the one that didn't get bummed. Those two animals are rarely comparable.
I think the other obvious database thing that we see, Clay, is some of these high-producing herds, there's a lot of enterotoxemia, sudden death risk in these nursing calves at about 6 to 8 weeks of age. We've had people vaccinate the mothers prior to calving. We've had people give C&D at birth. I mean, on and on and on. And what Bud taught our ranchers, if we create maternal behavior that increases nursing frequency, all of a sudden those vaccines start to work. It's amazing. Some of these ranchers haven't lost an enterotoxemia calf in 10 years, and they don't even vaccinate anymore. And so that creating a cooperative digestive biome is really healthy.
Okay, so we've got this herd moving. They're coming to the gate. The fellow or gal, the guy or gal on the horse at the gate is 3 or 4 posts down on whatever side we want them to go. When they're coming through, they're going to turn towards them. We're going to create movement in that direction anyways. So growing up, I was instructed that gates should always be in the corner, because it's easier, right? When you're coming to it, you've got a block on one side, and then you can be the block on the other side, putting them through. But then I never heard Bud speak in person, but I got introduced to the Bud Williams Stockmanship from a guy who grew up on the Maddox Ranch, actually, Hadley Hill, and he talked about the things we learned from Bud, and one of the things that we learned from Bud that he told me was we want to be teed up to the target. Now, if we're going to approach that gate at a 90-degree angle, it seems to me that maybe not necessarily in the corner is the best place, that maybe not in the middle, but not in the corner is maybe the best place for the gate. Would you agree with that, or how do you think about those things?
No, absolutely, Clay. Preferably, once we start this herd correctly, let's say we got 200 pairs. It'd be a dream that if there were just 3 of us out there, and once we got this herd started, there would be one person up in the first 25% of the herd. The other person would be off at the other corner, on just not behind the cattle, but on the right corner. And that other fella could go on down to the gate. And what that sets you up for, if it's in the middle of the fence, as soon as 15 or 20 cows go through that gate, then that person that's there, he becomes a cow, goes through the gate, and eventually gets in front of the herd and hooks onto the front. The person that was on that other side takes his place. And so then you've got another person at the gate. And finally, you've got somebody out in front of this herd like it's supposed to be, and he can lead them down to the processing pen. And that takes all of that holds up the front of the cows so they don't get ahead of their babies. That lets, and he can, it's hard to do because you can't see behind you, but he can hear them, he can see them, he can smell them. And so he'd like to get the front of that herd as close to his horse as he could so that he can regulate that speed and have some feel for what's happening behind him.
We've talked through quite a bit of this, and we've talked a lot about how we want the cattle to be paired up and moved as pairs all the way through. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of the speed that this herd is moving at? Is that going to change from herd to herd? You mentioned earlier kind of that comfortable walking pace of 3 miles an hour. Can you tell me a little bit just more about what it's going to look like if you were maybe a third-party observer watching from the hill, some of the things that you would see? Because I think we're kind of getting close to our goal here of getting down to these working facilities, and then my episode next week with Steve Cote takes it from there. So, and we can delve into that a little bit too if you want. But can you just kind of tell me some of the things you might observe as a third-party observer of this whole herd moving in the way that we've laid out so far today?
You would your barometers for success, Clay, would be the purpose. You would see these animals, comfort, confidence, purpose, and they would, depending on whether we're going through sandy country and it's level, or sandy country and we've got hills, these animals would be walking at their most comfortable rate with confidence and actually looking for a destination. It's just amazing to see. And we used to let cows out of a cornfield onto a gravel road to move them to the next field, and they would run until their tongues were out. Then they'd stop and then they'd scatter. No, if you manage the exit from that gate in the cornfield, or you've taught these cattle from replacement heifers to manage their exit from any kind of a holding pen, they walk by you and they know that they're going to have to go until they come to a gate, and they'll stop and wait for you. I had 700 yearlings. I used to have 15 guys come and help me gather them out of the canyons. And the first time I gathered with Bud, I asked him how much help we needed, and he said, "Nobody, if you'll stay out of the way." And so we had a great day.
I bet. We're gonna come back around, because you've talked a little bit about leaving the working facility and that being a training opportunity as well. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to lay out another wrinkle or consideration. It seems to me that some of what you're talking about is that we are training these cattle to perform well in the feedlot too. We've talked about those small carbohydrate meals multiple times through the day. They're grazing and processing or ruminating multiple times through the day when they're in the feedlot, and that a lot of cow-calf guys, they wash their hands of those calves as soon as they get on the truck in the fall, and they never see them again, and they never hear about them again. But if they've done all this work to instill this maternal performance in those calves, they're missing maybe some of the most profitable days in that calf's life by not retaining ownership. But I also think that it's a tough position, because how do you sell that animal to somebody without just calling the feedlot manager, inviting him out to come watch you work cows and saying, see, these calves have strong maternal instinct. They'll perform well in the feedlot with less illness. How much is that worth to you? I mean, would you do that?
Oh, Clay, the feedlot industry is making great progress. 10 years ago, I would say, gosh, I don't know how to relay that to a feed yard owner. We have feedlots now that can tell you, almost describe the behavior that might have happened at branding. And so if we can create a scenario where we expect weight gain on weaning day, which is possible. That's what Chris and Miranda taught us. Huh. And if you could do that, why would you sell them?
Right.
And if you could do that, and you'd also given pre-weaning vaccinations, and those cows were vaccinated pre-breeding, the babies were vaccinated again at branding, the babies were vaccinated again at pre-weaning, and we did some separation training that day, why would a feedlot repeat those vaccines on arrival? Those cattle would show up, they'd be quiet as a mouse, they'd walk to the bunk and eat 1.7% of their body weight in dry matter. They don't need vaccine, they need a place to eat, a bed, and some water, and they're ready to go. And and we are creating relationships with, there's a system of ranches that we've received calves from for the last 3 years, and they walk off the truck and ask our receiving team, what do you want me to do? And they lead these cattle everywhere. They would never, as they leave that truck, they would never get behind these babies. Those boys lead them clear to the back of that feed yard, go through the gate, lead them to the bunk. They line up and eat grass hay till they can't hold anymore and go lay down and go to sleep. That's what we've all got to achieve. And these tiny little things that start showing themselves, it's amazing what that does to immune function and lack of shrink. There's no reason to have shrink in cattle and transportation.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So, so let's circle back around to that. We've worked the cattle through, and I know that there's many episodes there in and of themselves, but we're getting ready to leave, and you talked about that being another training opportunity. Can you talk to me about our approach there and what that looks like?
Sure. So especially if these calves are going to a pen for pre-weaning vaccinations, that would be the time that you would try to remove the memory they have of branding day. And so if we're going to give pre-weaning vaccinations, we would quietly sort these mothers from their babies. And if at all possible, depending on our facility design, we might put the cows out of the way a little bit, and we might run somewhere between 10% and 100% of these calves through the working facility with the chute open, and just give them a dry run. Bring them right back, and then just start sending them through the chute for their inoculations. And then once they went through that chute, we wouldn't let them rejoin their mothers. We would have moved the mothers out of that holding pen, and we'd go get some bales of oat hay and a water tank, and we'd ask these babies to eat hay and water one night on the other side of their fence before they go back with their mothers. Then the important part of that is the person that is there at daybreak the next morning to let these babies go back with their mothers and nurse. And that changes everything. And so
what is that person there at daybreak doing?
Yeah, just letting the babies come to the gate, go by the handler, and go straight to their mother.
Very
you
good.
Get a lot of credit. You'd be really high on their totem pole.
Yep. And then is there yet more work to be done as far as getting back out to the pasture, or is it just kind of doing in reverse what we did coming in?
Exactly what we do. Yeah. You'd let those out, let them nurse until they were full, let them nurse till they walk away from their mother. And then you would go. By then your dream would be that this herd would follow you. my dream would be I'd let this nursing occur, and I'd be back at the gate. I'd probably be by myself. Then I'd go out in the front of these mothers, and as soon as the nursing was done, they would start volunteering to come to you, and you'd lead them as far as you could. If you let them a quarter mile and the herd stopped, start grazing, then you can go back and do the things we talked about, bringing them into the pen.
Sure. And yeah, that was one of the things that I kind of wanted to clean up too, as far as in my mind, or straighten out in my mind. You talked one time about, getting them started, and then it might take 2 or 3 times of you, I think you were saying backing up from the front of that cow towards her back end. Does it matter if the horse is pointed in the same direction as the cow or not in that scenario? Or how is it? Yeah. Does it matter if the horse is pointed in the same direction as the cow?
The first time or two, Clay, you would actually ask the horse to go the opposite direction. So think about standing behind a squeeze chute when you're preg checking cows, and you turn one cow out and you want to bring the next one in.
Right.
What do?
Yep.
Walk by her eye.
Yep.
And the minute she steps forward, you go with her.
Yep.
So that's what you're trying to create. Yeah. And when she cranks her head around to see you, then that's when you can go by her, depending on how sensitive she is. Go by her with your horse's eye, bring that eye around. And if she doesn't go, then you go further forward and go against her. So parallel motion stops cattle. Coming against them speeds them up. And continue is just a gentle giving of more territory. So if you want to stop them, ride like a railroad track. If you want them to continue, just keep giving them inch out to reward their movement.
And you're getting farther from them, kind of like a V shape. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. That puts you in the right place. If they stop, you're perfect to turn your horse against them again and send them again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right there.
Very good. And another thing that you mentioned a couple of times is that the vaccines start to work. Are they necessary and now they're performing better? Do they ever become unnecessary? And then the second question is it more of a marketing thing on to the next step that we continue to give them? What are your thoughts on that?
Clay, it is truly amazing what the cow-calf industry has done for the feed yard industry, and we've not trusted you guys. Those pre-breeding vaccines on a mama cow, those good vaccine programs as you grass turnout or branding, that pre-weaning vaccination, if it's done correctly, it's a godsend. And you're to the point now where we know that IBR virus, we know the BVD virus, we know those viruses still exist, but when we have BRD wrecks in feed yards, our PCR tests are negative to all those viruses. We are needing to work more on gram-negative vaccines, Manhemia, Histophilus, Multocida. If we have a viral problem in a feedlot, guess what they are? Our coronavirus and influenza B that we don't even have vaccines for.
Right.
So we got to get after the pharmaceutical companies. We need to develop some products for those two viruses that will do as good a job as you people have done with these other viruses. The thing that is exciting to me, that you've got that animal well immunized for the viruses we have. And so when we get them there, we use a really simple vaccine program so that we don't suppress the immune system and we don't stress. An immune response is a luxury, right? And so why take nutrients and stress those animals when they've changed their address?
Yeah, very good. Dr. Tom, have we missed anything today? I mean, I know we've gone a little under an hour here, and of course there's a lot more that could be said about these things, and I think it almost requires getting somebody to come out to your ranch and help you just have the discipline to do these things. But is there anything that was on your to-do list today that you wanted to make sure that we covered?
Never pass up a chance to stop. Never pass up a chance to wait. Never pass up a chance to observe. And you'll never regret those things, and that's very, very special. And the other thing, Clay, is never pass up a chance to develop curiosity and ask questions. You all have people that are magic with their horse, magic with their dog, magic with their cattle. Ask them to help you. That's and we can't all be identical, but if you don't have an attitude to do what the cattle owner wants you to do, or you're not all on the same pathway, I guess maybe you'd call it motive, wouldn't it? We're here to take care of these creatures and make them better, and we're here to make every animal-human intervention an opportunity for safety and performance and satisfaction.
Sure. Very good. I really appreciate your time today, Dr. Tom. Thank you.
Thank you, Clay. Have a good day.
As I said, we will be picking this conversation up from that point of getting them into the corral and talking about how do we work with them in the corrals and work them through the bud box and up the race or up the alleyway, through the chute and all those things with Steve Cote next week. So really looking forward to that, releasing that episode as well. Steve is a great mind when it comes to stockmanship, and he's got his stockmanship manual, of course, and a very thorough guy. So really looking forward to sharing that conversation with you. We'll see you again real soon with another episode of the Working Cows Podcast.
We invite you to visit workingcows.net to subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher. You'll also find detailed show notes pages, resources from our guests, and the industry leaders who have influenced them. For more ideas on putting your cows to work for you in a more profitable way, tune in next week.